For most of human history, evolution was invisible, not because it was hidden, but because it moved too slowly for the human mind to notice. A forest changes quietly. A coastline reshapes itself grain by grain. Mountains rise with such patience that they appear permanent. And evolution belongs to this same category of deep time, a process so vast and gradual that entire worlds can transform between one heartbeat of geological history and the next. Tonight, as the world grows quieter, it is possible to imagine life not as a collection of separate creatures, but as one continuous unfolding story stretching back billions of years. Every leaf, every bird call, every drifting whale beneath the dark surface of the ocean carries traces of ancient experiments that began long before mammals existed, long before trees, long before bones, or eyes, or even the oxygen in the atmosphere. The strange thing is that evolution does not plan ahead. There is no blueprint hidden behind nature, no architect sketching future species in advance. Instead, life changes through countless tiny adjustments accumulating across immense stretches of time. A feather becomes slightly more insulating. A fin bends a little differently in shallow water. A creature survives because its camouflage resembles bark by a fraction more than its neighbors. And eventually, after enough generations, something entirely new appears. The owl descending silently through midnight forests. The orchid shaped precisely for a single species of moth. The human hand capable of building telescopes and touching the bark of trees whose ancestors once shaded dinosaurs. All of it emerged from small changes layered slowly upon one another like sediment settling at the bottom of an ancient sea. If we could travel backward through time, Earth would become increasingly unfamiliar. Cities would vanish first, then farms and roads, then even grasslands would disappear, because grasses themselves are relatively recent inventions in the timeline of life. Further back still, the continents would look wrong. The skies would carry different colors. Giant insects would drift through oxygen-rich air. Vast reptiles would move through fern forests beneath volcanic horizons. And if we continued backward far enough, we would eventually arrive at a planet with no animals at all, only oceans, dark oceans beneath a younger sun. And somewhere within those waters, chemistry began organizing itself into something astonishing. No one knows the exact moment life emerged. The details remain partly hidden beneath billions of years of erosion and tectonic change. Yet the evidence suggests that life appeared surprisingly early in Earth's history, perhaps as soon as conditions allowed liquid water to remain stable. At first, life was unimaginably simple. Single cells drifting through ancient seas. No thoughts, no eyes, no voices. And yet inside those microscopic organisms lay the foundation for every future ecosystem, every rainforest, every migrating whale, every sleeping fox beneath winter snow, every human memory ever formed. The scale of that transformation is difficult for the brain to fully absorb. A single cell does not seem dramatic, but evolution works through accumulation. Given enough time, simplicity becomes complexity almost automatically, the way rivers eventually carve valleys through stone. One of the quiet miracles of evolution is that every living thing carries a record of its past within itself. Human embryos briefly develop structures resembling ancient gill arches. Whales possess tiny pelvic bones inherited from land-dwelling ancestors. Deep inside the human spine, the tailbone remains as a subtle reminder that our lineage once balanced actual tails while moving through prehistoric forests. The body remembers, even when consciousness forgets. Biology continues carrying ancient history forward. There is something strangely calming about this realization. The modern world often feels separate from nature, as though humanity stepped outside the evolutionary story. Yet evolution never stopped. It continues silently around us and within us. Viruses mutate constantly. Birds adapt to cities. Certain fish evolve resistance to polluted waters. Human populations continue changing in subtle ways tied to diet, disease, altitude, and climate. Life is still experimenting, still adjusting, still responding to the endless pressures and possibilities of existence. In some places, Evolution can almost be watched in real time. On islands especially, nature behaves like an isolated laboratory. Creatures arriving there encounter unusual conditions, fewer predators, unfamiliar food sources, strange climates. Over generations, remarkable transformations begin unfolding. Birds lose the ability to fly when flight becomes unnecessary. Reptiles grow larger or smaller depending on available resources. Species diverge from their mainland relatives until they become entirely distinct forms of life. This isolation shaped some of the most famous observations in the history of science. When Charles Darwin traveled aboard the HMS Beagle during the 19th century, he encountered finches on the Galapagos Islands whose beaks differed subtly from island to island. Some were shaped for cracking seeds, others for feeding on insects or cactus flowers. At first glance, the differences seemed minor, but together they hinted at something profound. Species were not fixed. They changed, slowly, unevenly, generation after generation, shaped by the environments surrounding them. Darwin himself spent years hesitating before publishing these ideas. Evolution challenged deeply rooted assumptions about permanence in nature. It suggested that humans were not separate creations placed outside the natural order, but participants within the same ancient process governing all living things. Today, this idea feels almost intuitive, but at the time, it transformed humanity's understanding of itself. And yet, evolution is not merely a story of competition, despite how it is sometimes described. Cooperation also shaped life in extraordinary ways. The cells inside the human body are themselves ancient collaborations. Long ago, primitive organisms absorbed bacteria without digesting them. Instead of dying, those bacteria continued living inside their hosts, eventually becoming structures known as mitochondria, tiny energy-producing engines still present in nearly every human cell today. In a sense, every breath taken tonight depends upon an alliance formed billions of years ago between microscopic organisms drifting through prehistoric oceans. Nature builds complexity not only through struggle, but through partnership. Forests themselves operate through hidden cooperation. Beneath the soil, fungal networks connect tree roots across vast distances. Nutrients and chemical signals move through these underground systems in ways scientists are only beginning to fully understand. Older trees may even support younger saplings through these connections, quietly sharing resources beneath the darkness of the forest floor. The more evolution is studied, the less nature resembles a simple hierarchy of winners and losers. Instead, life appears as a web of interdependence, so intricate that no organism truly exists alone. Even the human body contains trillions of microbes living across the skin and within the digestive system. Many are essential to survival. Entire invisible ecosystems travel with us constantly, shaping digestion, immunity, even mood and behavior in subtle ways. A person walking alone beneath the night sky is never truly alone. They are an ecosystem carrying echoes of ancient oceans within them. And perhaps that is one of the most peaceful truths hidden inside evolution. Life did not arrive fully formed. It emerged gradually from darkness, adapting to impossible conditions across spans of time, so vast they almost dissolve ordinary thought. Countless species vanished along the way. Entire branches of the evolutionary tree disappeared forever during mass extinctions caused by asteroid impacts, volcanic winters, collapsing climates, and shifting seas. Yet life continued. Again and again, after catastrophe, the planet slowly recovered, and new forms emerged from the ruins of older worlds. The dinosaurs disappeared beneath ash-darkened skies, but small mammals survived quietly in burrows and forests, inheriting a changed Earth. Much later, primates evolved grasping hands and forward-facing eyes among tree branches, and eventually, somewhere in Africa, early humans began walking upright beneath ancient stars. Those early humans lived within a world that would feel both familiar and impossibly distant to us now. The wind moved through tall grasslands much as it does today. Rain gathered over dark horizons. Rivers carried moonlight across stone. But beyond the glow of firelight, Enormous predators still moved through the night. Giant cats watched silently from the shadows. Hyenas laughed in the distance. Herds of animals migrated across landscapes untouched by roads or electric light. Human beings evolved inside that environment for far longer than civilization has existed. In fact, if the entire history of humanity were compressed into a single day, modern industrial society would occupy only the final few seconds before midnight. For nearly all of our evolutionary past, humans lived as hunter-gatherers, moving through forests, coastlines, deserts, and plains in small groups deeply connected to the rhythms of nature. The human nervous system formed itself within those ancient conditions, and even now, traces of that world remain quietly embedded inside the modern mind. The sudden alertness triggered by unexpected movement in darkness, the calming effect of flowing water, the deep satisfaction of gathering around warm light at night. These responses are not random. They are ancient inheritances carried forward through thousands upon thousands of generations. Evolution shapes behavior as carefully as it shapes bone or muscle. Even sleep itself bears evolutionary fingerprints. Human beings are unusual among primates for sleeping relatively little, yet very deeply. Scientists believe this may have emerged because early humans faced dangers that favored efficient, restorative sleep rather than long hours of vulnerability in open environments. Dreaming, too, may hold ancient adaptive roots. Some researchers suggest dreams evolved partly as simulations, safe internal rehearsals where the brain could practice responding to threats, social situations, or uncertain environments. Long before written stories existed, the sleeping mind was already generating narratives in darkness, and somewhere far back in time, an early human may have awakened beside a fire after dreaming of falling, being chased, or wandering unfamiliar terrain beneath strange stars, experiencing emotions that remain recognizable tonight. There is comfort in realizing how much connects us to the distant past. Modern life often creates the illusion that humanity has escaped nature. Buildings rise higher, screens glow brighter. Artificial environments separate us from changing seasons and migrating animals, yet evolution still lives beneath every layer of technology. The human eye remains tuned to natural light cycles. The brain responds powerfully to faces because survival once depended upon reading social emotion quickly and accurately. Even anxiety itself may partly reflect ancient systems designed to detect danger before it fully emerged. What feels burdensome in modern life sometimes began as protection in prehistoric landscapes. The mind evolved for survival, not endless peace. And yet evolution also produced extraordinary capacities for wonder. At some point, human beings began doing something evolution never explicitly planned for: contemplating existence itself. Early people painted animals across cave walls deep underground where firelight flickered against stone. They buried their dead with objects that may have carried symbolic meaning. They looked upward at the stars and imagined stories within them. Awareness became reflective. Life began examining its own origins. This may be one of the strangest developments in the entire evolutionary story. The universe produced organisms capable not only of surviving, but of asking questions about survival. Creatures emerged that could study fossils, sequence DNA, and reconstruct the history of ancient oceans from fragments of rock. In a sense, evolution eventually created beings able to observe evolution. And the deeper scientists look into that story, the more interconnected all life appears. Inside the human genome are traces of ancient viruses inserted into DNA millions of years ago. Some of those viral remnants became useful over time, eventually helping support functions involved in pregnancy and development. Pieces of ancient infection transformed into biological tools. Evolution wastes very little. Structures originally adapted for one purpose are often reused for another. Feathers may first have evolved partly for temperature regulation before becoming essential for flight. Bones in the reptilian jaw gradually transformed into delicate structures inside the mammalian ear, allowing entirely new forms of hearing. Nature modifies existing patterns again and again rather than starting from scratch. This creates a world filled with strange imperfections and beautiful compromises. The human spine, for example, still reflects its evolutionary history. It functions remarkably well much of the time, yet it also carries inefficiencies inherited from ancestors that once moved on four limbs. Wisdom teeth frequently become impacted because human jaws gradually changed faster than tooth patterns evolved. The eye itself contains blind spots caused by the way nerve fibers are arranged across the retina. Evolution does not produce perfection. It produces what works well enough for survival under specific conditions, and somehow that makes the natural world feel even more real. There is no polished symmetry imposed from above. Instead, life carries scars of its own history everywhere. Ancient pathways remain visible beneath newer adaptations, much like old streets hidden beneath modern cities. Sometimes evolution moves toward greater complexity. Sometimes it moves toward simplicity. Cave-dwelling fish lose eyesight when vision no longer serves a purpose in darkness. Parasites may abandon entire biological systems because they can rely upon hosts instead. There is no universal direction, only response, only adaptation unfolding moment by moment across geological time. This becomes especially clear during mass extinctions. Earth has endured several events so catastrophic that most species vanished entirely. The most famous occurred around 66 million years ago, when an asteroid struck near present-day Mexico with unimaginable force. Forests ignited, dust filled the atmosphere, food chains collapsed worldwide. For a long time afterward, the planet must have felt eerily silent. And yet, even in those devastated landscapes, small pockets of life endured. Tiny mammals survived underground. Certain birds persisted. Freshwater ecosystems proved more resilient than expected. Slowly, over millions of years, ecosystems recovered. Evolution began again from what remained. The history of life is filled with these strange cycles of destruction and renewal. Coral reefs disappear and later return. Ice ages reshape entire continents. Forests expand and retreat with changing climates. Species emerge, flourish briefly in geological terms, and vanish. Nothing in nature remains fixed forever. Not oceans, not mountains, not even the stars overhead, which themselves evolve slowly across cosmic time. The calcium in human bones was forged inside ancient stars that exploded long before Earth existed. The iron in human blood originated in stellar furnaces billions of years ago. In the deepest sense, evolution is not separate from the universe itself. It is one expression of a larger process in which matter gradually organizes into increasing layers of complexity. Atoms become molecules. Molecules become cells. Cells become organisms capable of memory, perception, emotion, and thought. And all of it unfolds according to the quiet laws of nature, operating patiently across unimaginable expanses of time. Perhaps that is why studying evolution can feel oddly peaceful despite its immense scale. It places human life inside a continuity far older and larger than individual worries. Every person alive tonight belongs to an unbroken chain stretching backward through parents, ancestors, mammals, reptiles, fish, microscopic organisms, all the way toward the earliest stirrings of life in ancient seas. A chain that never once fully broke. Across billions of years, through volcanic extinctions, frozen planets, asteroid impacts, and shifting continents, life continued handing existence forward from one generation to the next. Somewhere in that immense sequence, countless fragile moments had to succeed perfectly. An animal survived one difficult winter. A tiny organism divided successfully in warm, shallow water. A mother protected her offspring through a season of drought. A migrating group found fresh water beyond a barren horizon. Again and again, life persisted through narrow passages where extinction waited close beside survival. Looking backward across evolutionary history can sometimes feel like observing an endless series of quiet improbabilities layered carefully upon one another. And yet the process itself remains entirely natural. No single generation notices the transformation taking place. A forest does not realize it is evolving. A bird does not understand that its wing shape reflects millions of years of selective pressures. Even humans, with all their intelligence, struggle to perceive gradual change while living inside it. Evolution becomes visible mostly through patience. Fossils reveal it. DNA reveals it. The arrangement of bones inside living creatures reveals it. The hand of a human, the wing of a bat, the flipper of a whale, and the foreleg of a wolf all contain remarkably similar skeletal structures inherited from distant common ancestors. Beneath outward differences, the same ancient blueprint quietly persists. This hidden unity runs through all life. The more biology advances, the more astonishing those connections become. Human DNA overlaps extensively not only with apes, but with mice, fish, insects, and even plants at the level of certain fundamental cellular mechanisms. The chemistry of life remains deeply shared across species separated by hundreds of millions of years. Every living thing on Earth uses the same genetic language, the same 4 molecular letters repeating endlessly in different arrangements. It is difficult to think of another discovery more quietly profound than this one. All forests, all oceans, all animals, all human civilizations emerge from variations of the same underlying code carried through time since the earliest ancestors of life. In a sense, every ecosystem on Earth is composed of distant relatives. The realization changes how the natural world appears. A sleeping fox beneath snowfall no longer feels entirely separate from humanity, nor does a drifting jellyfish illuminated by moonlight in dark ocean water. The distance between species remains real, of course, shaped by millions of years of divergence, but underneath those differences lies shared ancestry stretching backward into ancient time. Perhaps this is why people often experience a subtle emotional response when observing nature closely. Something ancient recognizes itself there. The human brain evolved within living systems, surrounded by animal movement, weather patterns, forests, insects, rivers, and changing skies. For most of human existence, survival depended upon understanding these rhythms intimately, to notice the migration of birds, to recognize seasonal plants, to interpret tracks in mud, to read approaching storms from cloud formations and shifts in wind. Attention itself evolved partly through nature. Even now, modern research suggests that natural environments calm the nervous system in measurable ways. Heart rates slow, stress hormones decrease, mental fatigue softens. A quiet forest path or the steady sound of ocean waves can influence the brain more deeply than many people realize. Perhaps some part of the mind still remembers the conditions under which it formed. There is another strange feature of evolution that becomes increasingly noticeable the more one studies it. Beauty repeatedly emerges from purely functional processes. The iridescent wings of butterflies evolved through microscopic structures affecting light reflection. Birdsong developed through communication and mating pressures. Flowers formed intricate colors and scents to attract pollinators, and yet these adaptations often appear artistic. Nature creates patterns that seem almost intentional in their elegance, despite arising through blind evolutionary mechanisms over immense spans of time. Snow leopards disappear against mountain stone with extraordinary camouflage. Deep-sea creatures generate blue bioluminescent light in total darkness. Tropical birds display feathers more vivid than painted glass. Evolution is practical, but the results can feel dreamlike. Some of the most mesmerizing examples exist beneath the ocean surface. For most of Earth's history, life remained marine. The oceans became vast evolutionary laboratories where countless biological experiments unfolded long before animals moved onto land. Strange armored fish drifted through prehistoric seas. Trilobites crawled across ancient ocean floors. Enormous marine reptiles later hunted beneath waves during the age of dinosaurs. Even today, much of the deep ocean remains unexplored. Far below sunlight, evolution produced creatures adapted to crushing pressure, freezing temperatures, and perpetual darkness. Certain fish carry glowing organs beneath transparent skin. Some animals survive near hydrothermal vents where superheated chemicals pour from cracks in Earth's crust. These ecosystems exist in conditions once thought impossible for life, and yet life adapts. Again and again, evolution demonstrates the extraordinary flexibility of biology. Organisms survive in Antarctic ice, acidic hot springs, underground caves, and deserts so dry they resemble portions of Mars. Tardigrades, microscopic animals sometimes called water bears, can endure freezing, radiation, dehydration, and even the vacuum of space for limited periods. Certain bacteria remain dormant for astonishing lengths of time before becoming active again when conditions improve. Life explores every opportunity available to it, not consciously, not strategically, but inevitably, through endless variation interacting with environment. There is something deeply humbling in this process. Human beings often imagine themselves as standing apart from nature because of technology and culture. Yet biologically, humanity remains subject to the same evolutionary forces governing all organisms: the need for sleep, the drive for connection, fear responses, attachment between parents and children, the emotional effects of isolation. These patterns emerged through evolutionary history because they increased survival within social groups. Human emotions are not separate from biology. They are partly shaped by ancient adaptive pressures carried through nervous systems across countless generations. Even loneliness may have evolutionary roots. For early humans, separation from the group could become dangerous very quickly. Isolation increased vulnerability to predators, starvation, injury, and conflict. As a result, the human brain evolved strong emotional signals encouraging social connection and belonging. The modern world changes rapidly, but the nervous system still carries older instructions, and sometimes, beneath all the noise of modern civilization, people still feel the pull of ancient instincts that once guided survival under open skies. A fire at night still captures attention. Rhythmic waves still soothe the mind. Stars still inspire awe. Long before telescopes revealed galaxies, humans looked upward with wonder. Evolution had already produced creatures capable of contemplating infinity. That alone is remarkable. The atoms composing the human brain emerged from cosmic events billions of years ago, eventually organizing into living systems able to ask questions about meaning, existence, and time itself. Through evolution, the universe became capable of observing its own history. And yet, despite humanity's intelligence, nature retains immense mystery. Scientists still debate important details about how consciousness arises from neural activity. The precise origins of life remain uncertain. Entire species disappear before they are fully studied. Vast portions of the ocean floor remain unseen by human eyes. The deeper knowledge grows, the more complexity appears. Evolution is not a ladder leading neatly upward. It is more like an enormous branching river system spreading across deep time, with countless pathways ending, dividing, merging, or vanishing entirely. Most species that ever existed are now extinct. Entire evolutionary experiments appeared briefly in geological history and disappeared forever. But traces remain in stone, in deserts, cliffs, and ancient seabeds lifted high into mountains. Fossils lie preserved like messages from vanished worlds. A footprint pressed into soft mud hundreds of millions of years ago can survive long enough to be discovered by modern eyes. The delicate outline of a fern may remain visible in stone long after the forest itself disappeared. Entire skeletons sometimes emerge slowly from rock layers, revealing creatures unlike anything alive today. There is something almost dreamlike about fossils. They are both absence and presence at once, a reminder that life passes away and a reminder that traces endure. When paleontologists uncover ancient bones, they are not merely finding dead organisms, they are reconstructing environments, climates, predator-prey relationships, migration patterns, even behaviors. A healed fracture in a fossilized limb suggests survival after injury. Tooth marks reveal ancient struggles. Tiny growth rings inside bones can indicate seasons of scarcity and abundance. Stone becomes memory, and through that memory, the history of evolution slowly reassembles itself. One of the most fascinating patterns revealed by fossils is how often extinction creates opportunities for entirely new forms of life. After major ecological collapse, surviving species enter altered worlds filled with unoccupied niches. Over time, evolution diversifies rapidly in response. This happened after the extinction of the dinosaurs. Small mammals, once relatively limited in size and influence, expanded into new environments. Some returned to the oceans and eventually became whales. Others adapted to forests, grasslands, mountains, or underground habitats. Primates evolved grasping hands, suited for climbing among branches. Much later, certain ape lineages began walking upright across changing African landscapes. The path toward humanity was never inevitable. If one ancient climate shift had unfolded differently, if one asteroid had missed Earth, if one fragile population had vanished during drought or disease, the world tonight might contain no humans at all. Evolution does not guarantee outcomes. It only generates possibilities. This realization can feel strangely liberating. Human existence begins to appear not as the predetermined center of nature, but as one remarkable branch within a vast living tapestry. Intelligence evolved because under certain circumstances it became useful. Consciousness deepened because awareness improved survival. Language emerged gradually from social complexity, cooperation, memory, and symbolic thought. And eventually, storytelling appeared. Perhaps storytelling itself carries evolutionary value. Stories preserve knowledge, strengthen group identity, transmit survival information, and help humans imagine future possibilities. Long before books existed, spoken narratives traveled through firelit camps beneath ancient stars. In a way, evolution shaped creatures who survive partly by sharing imagined worlds with one another. Even now, the human mind naturally seeks narrative structure inside reality. People look at fossils and imagine prehistoric landscapes. They watch migrating birds and feel echoes of ancient movement. They study distant galaxies and search for meaning within immense scales of space and time. The brain evolved not only to perceive the world, but to interpret it. And interpretation often carries emotion. Many people experience a subtle melancholy when thinking about extinction. Entire species once moved across Earth with their own behaviors, calls, instincts, and perceptions, yet vanished completely. The last woolly mammoth eventually died on a remote Arctic island. The final dodo disappeared beneath human expansion. Countless extinct creatures left behind only fragments of bone or impressions in sediment. Silence gradually replaced their presence. Yet extinction is not merely tragedy within evolution. It is also part of the process through which ecosystems change and renew themselves. Forests depend upon cycles of growth and decay. Fallen trees nourish future life through decomposition. Wildfires clear landscapes that later bloom with new vegetation. Nature continuously transforms itself. Nothing remains frozen for long. Even the continents drift slowly across Earth's surface, reshaping climates and evolutionary pathways over millions of years. Antarctica was once warmer and forested. Vast inland seas once divided portions of North America. The Sahara Desert has alternated between arid emptiness and green savanna multiple times throughout history. Life adapts to moving worlds. This movement continues today, although modern human civilization often obscures the slower rhythms beneath daily life. Birds still migrate across oceans using ancient navigational systems tied to stars and magnetic fields. Salmon return to the rivers where they were born. Sea turtles cross enormous distances through dark waters with astonishing precision. Instinct guides them through patterns established across evolutionary time. And humans possess instincts too, though they are often layered beneath culture and technology. The attraction to landscapes offering both shelter and visibility may reflect ancient survival preferences. Fear of snakes or spiders can emerge remarkably early in childhood, compared to fears of modern dangers like automobiles or electrical systems. Infants instinctively attend to human faces within hours of birth. The ancient world still echoes through the nervous system. Sometimes those echoes appear in unexpected ways. Many people feel uneasy in complete silence because, for early humans, sudden silence in nature could indicate danger nearby. Others find comfort in rhythmic sounds like rainfall, ocean surf, or wind moving through trees, acoustic environments that accompanied human evolution for countless generations. The body listens for familiarity older than civilization itself. Meanwhile, evolution continues unfolding beyond human awareness. In urban environments, some birds now sing at higher frequencies to rise above traffic noise. Certain animals alter activity patterns in response to artificial light. Insects evolve resistance to pesticides. Bacteria adapt to antibiotics with alarming speed. Natural selection never sleeps. Every ecosystem on Earth remains dynamic, constantly responding to shifting pressures and opportunities. Climate, geography, disease, competition, cooperation, and random mutation all interact in endlessly complex ways, and beneath all of it lies time. Deep time. The true scale of evolution is almost impossible to emotionally comprehend because human lives are so brief by comparison. Civilizations rise and fall in moments relative to geological history. Entire mountain ranges erode slowly into plains while species appear and disappear around them. If Earth's history were compressed into a single calendar year, modern humans would emerge only during the final minutes before midnight on December 31st. For nearly the entire story of life, no human eyes existed to witness it. Forests spread across ancient continents unobserved. Enormous reptiles thundered through river valleys beneath unfamiliar constellations. Strange marine creatures glowed silently in prehistoric seas. And throughout those immense ages, evolution continued patiently shaping life generation by generation. Perhaps patience is one of the deepest lessons hidden within nature. Nothing truly important in evolution happens quickly. Forests require decades to mature. Coral reefs build themselves slowly through tiny accumulated structures. Complex organisms emerge through countless gradual modifications extending across millions of years. The natural world is not rushed, and when people spend time observing nature carefully, they often begin slowing internally as well. Attention softens, awareness widens, thoughts become less fragmented. Maybe this is partly because the human mind evolved within slower environments. For most of evolutionary history, information arrived at natural speeds, changing weather, animal movement, shifting seasons, sunrise and darkness. The nervous system never evolved for endless streams of artificial stimulation. Somewhere beneath modern life, older biological rhythms still remain. The pulse of circadian cycles, the response to firelight, the quiet alertness of nighttime listening. Even now, as many people drift toward sleep, their bodies continue patterns inherited from ancestors who rested cautiously beside flames while predators moved beyond the edge of darkness. And yet those ancestors also carried curiosity. They looked outward. They wondered. That same curiosity eventually led humans to uncover the evolutionary story itself. A story written not in myths alone, but in DNA, fossils, geology, anatomy, and the silent evidence preserved throughout the natural world. A story still unfolding tonight, somewhere at this very moment. In forests untouched by roads, evolution is continuing in silence. Tiny insects are adapting to local temperatures. Fungi are exchanging nutrients beneath the soil. Deep beneath the ocean surface, organisms drift through darkness, carrying genetic variations that may shape future species millions of years from now. Nothing announces these changes. There are no visible boundaries between one era and the next. Evolution moves too gradually for dramatic entrances. Entire transformations unfold quietly across generations, until eventually the descendants of a species no longer resemble their distant ancestors at all. This is one reason the natural world can feel so ancient and alive at the same time. Every organism is both temporary and connected to something immensely old. A single oak tree may live for centuries, yet the lineage behind oak trees stretches backward through evolutionary history far beyond human civilization. Even ordinary creatures carry astonishing depth when viewed through time. A house cat sleeping beside a window carries instincts shaped by wild hunters that once moved through deserts and grasslands. The shape of a horse's leg reflects millions of years of adaptation for efficient running across open terrain. The hummingbird hovering beside flowers depends upon evolutionary relationships between bird and plant, refined across ages of mutual influence. Nature is filled with partnerships like these. Bees and flowering plants evolved alongside one another so closely that many flowers now possess shapes, colors, scents, and blooming schedules specifically suited to certain pollinators. Some orchids imitate the appearance of insects to attract them, Certain figs can only reproduce through relationships with tiny wasps that enter enclosed flowers hidden inside the fruit itself. The more closely one looks, the more evolution resembles an intricate conversation unfolding across time. Species shape one another continuously. Predators influence prey behavior. Prey influence predator adaptations. Plants alter atmospheric chemistry. Microbes reshape ecosystems. Life changes the environment, and the environment changes life in return. Earth itself has been transformed by evolution. Long ago, the atmosphere contained very little oxygen. Early microbial organisms gradually altered the planet through photosynthesis, releasing oxygen as a byproduct over enormous spans of time. Eventually, this changed the chemistry of oceans, rocks, and air so profoundly that entirely new forms of life became possible. In a very real sense, living organisms helped build the world later organisms would inherit. The forests producing oxygen tonight are part of a process billions of years old, and there is something deeply peaceful in recognizing how interconnected these systems remain. Human beings inhale oxygen generated largely by plants and marine microorganisms. Plants rely upon carbon dioxide exhaled by animals. Fungi decompose dead matter, returning nutrients to soil where future life can grow. Nothing exists entirely alone. Even death participates in continuity. In forests, fallen trees slowly become habitats for insects, moss, fungi, birds, and seedlings. Along coastlines, the bodies of whales sinking into deep ocean water create entire temporary ecosystems on the seafloor, sustaining strange creatures for decades. Nature recycles endlessly. Matter changes form, but rarely disappears. The atoms within human bodies once belonged to ancient oceans, prehistoric animals, vanished forests, volcanic stone, and stars older than Earth itself. Evolution rearranges existing materials into new structures over and over again, like a patient sculptor working across unimaginable spans of time. Perhaps this is why studying evolution can soften the fear of impermanence. Everything in nature changes, yet nothing is entirely disconnected from what came before. Life flows forward continuously through transformation rather than permanence. A river remains a river even though its water never stops moving. The same is true of living systems, and strangely, the evolutionary story is filled not only with competition and survival, but with vulnerability. Many species persist through delicate balances that can easily shift. Coral reefs depend upon narrow temperature ranges. Certain amphibians require extremely specific environmental conditions to reproduce. Some ancient trees survive only in isolated regions where climate still resembles the distant past. Evolution creates resilience, but it also creates specialization, and specialization can become fragile when environments change rapidly. There have been moments in Earth's history when climates shifted so dramatically that ecosystems struggled to adapt. Ice advanced across continents, sea levels rose and fell, volcanic eruptions altered atmospheric conditions for generations. Through all of it, species either adapted, migrated, or disappeared. Yet life as a whole continued, again and again. One of the most remarkable examples of endurance exists in the story of horseshoe crabs. These ancient marine animals have existed in recognizable forms for hundreds of millions of years, surviving multiple mass extinctions that erased countless other lineages. Their ancestors moved through shallow seas long before dinosaurs appeared. To encounter a horseshoe crab today is to glimpse something profoundly ancient still alive in the modern world. The same can be said of crocodiles, sharks, jellyfish, and certain deep-sea organisms whose body plans changed relatively little across immense spans of evolutionary time. Not all evolution moves toward radical transformation. Sometimes a design simply continues working. There is a quiet elegance in that idea. Nature does not seek novelty for its own sake. It preserves what functions effectively within given conditions. Some organisms remain relatively stable for extraordinary lengths of time, because the environments they occupy change slowly enough that major adaptations are unnecessary. Meanwhile, elsewhere, rapid evolution unfolds continuously. On islands, isolated lakes, and fragmented habitats, populations may diverge surprisingly quickly under new environmental pressures. Small genetic changes accumulate, behaviors shift, physical traits gradually separate one group from another. Given enough time, entirely new species emerge. The boundaries between species themselves can sometimes become surprisingly blurry. Certain closely related animals still interbreed. Plants frequently exchange genetic material in complex ways. Even human evolutionary history appears more intertwined than once believed. Modern genetic evidence suggests that early humans encountered and interbred with other human relatives, including Neanderthals and Denisovans. Their DNA remains present in many living people today, faint echoes of ancient encounters carried invisibly through generations. The past survives inside the present more often than we realize, and evolution rarely erases old layers completely. The human brain itself reflects this layered history. Deep structures involved in survival, fear, and instinct evolved long before the regions associated with abstract reasoning and language became highly developed. Ancient neural systems still operate beneath conscious thought, influencing emotion and behavior constantly. This can create a peculiar tension within modern life. Humans possess technology capable of crossing oceans, studying galaxies, and altering the planet itself, yet the nervous system carrying out these achievements still contains ancient biological machinery shaped in prehistoric environments. The result is a species both extraordinarily advanced and deeply ancestral at the same time. Perhaps this explains why nature still affects people so powerfully despite centuries of urbanization. A quiet snowfall, distant thunder, or the sight of moonlight reflected across water can evoke emotions difficult to fully explain. Something older than language responds to those experiences. The evolutionary story lives not only in fossils or DNA, but within perception itself, within fear, within awe, within the strange calm many people feel while watching waves repeat endlessly against a shore. Rhythm may have evolutionary importance too. Repeated patterns often signal stability in nature. Steady rainfall, breathing, footsteps, heartbeats, ocean tides. The human brain appears deeply responsive to rhythmic sound and movement, which may help explain why rainstorms, crackling firewood, and distant surf feel naturally soothing. For countless generations, these sounds accompanied survival rather than danger, and survival, over evolutionary time, shaped preference. Even human music may partly emerge from ancient sensitivities to rhythm, vocal tone, emotional signaling, and social bonding. Long before written language, people likely communicated emotion and cohesion through patterned sound. The roots of art itself may reach deep into evolutionary history, which makes it even more extraordinary that evolution eventually produced beings capable of reflecting consciously upon beauty, mortality, time, and existence itself beneath the quiet glow of distant stars. For ancient humans, the night sky must have felt overwhelming. Without modern light pollution, the stars appeared in staggering numbers across the darkness. The Milky Way stretched overhead like pale drifting smoke. Meteors crossed silently above sleeping landscapes. Planets wandered slowly among fixed constellations whose patterns became woven into memory and myth. Those early observers did not yet understand galaxies or nuclear fusion or cosmic expansion, but evolution had already shaped minds capable of wonder, and wonder itself may have carried survival value. Curiosity encourages exploration. Exploration uncovers new resources, new environments, new possibilities. A species capable of asking questions gains advantages beyond immediate instinct. Over time, human curiosity expanded outward from survival into philosophy, science, art, and eventually into the study of evolution itself. The remarkable thing is that the human brain evolved gradually, without any foresight that it would one day contemplate the origins of stars or sequence genomes in laboratories. Complexity emerged step by step. Neural systems originally useful for navigation, social cooperation, memory, and tool use slowly accumulated into forms of intelligence capable of abstract thought. Language expanded, culture accelerated learning across generations. Knowledge no longer depended entirely upon genetic inheritance. Ideas themselves began evolving. In some ways, human culture resembles a second evolutionary system layered atop biology. Technologies adapt, Languages branch and transform. Stories mutate as they spread between people. Certain behaviors persist because societies reward them, while others fade away over time. Patterns repeat across scales: variation, selection, inheritance, change. The same underlying principles echo through biology, culture, and even ecosystems themselves. And yet human evolution remains biological too. Lactose tolerance developed relatively recently among certain populations after the domestication of cattle. Some groups evolved adaptations for surviving at high altitudes where oxygen levels remain low. Skin pigmentation shifted gradually in response to sunlight exposure across different regions of Earth. Evolution never paused when civilization began. It simply entered new environments shaped partly by humans themselves. Cities now function almost like artificial ecosystems. Certain animals thrive within them remarkably well. Pigeons adapt to architecture resembling cliff environments. Raccoons solve increasingly complex problems while navigating urban spaces. Foxes move through suburban neighborhoods beneath streetlights as quietly as their ancestors once crossed moonlit forests. Nature enters every available space. Even abandoned buildings eventually fill with moss, vines, insects, birds, and weathering stone. Left long enough, human structures themselves slowly return to ecological systems through decay and colonization. The boundary between civilization and nature is never absolute. After all, cities are built by organisms produced through evolution using materials drawn from Earth. Concrete, steel, glass, and electricity may feel separate from forests and oceans, yet they emerge from the same planetary story. Human industry is not outside nature. It is one unusual expression of it. Perhaps that perspective changes how human existence feels within the larger timeline of life. Rather than standing apart from evolution, humanity becomes part of an ongoing experiment billions of years in progress, a temporary but remarkable branch of Earth's history. And like all branches, it remains vulnerable to change. Throughout evolution, adaptability has often mattered more than strength. Species surviving mass extinctions were not always the largest or most dominant. Sometimes survival favored flexibility, small size, broad diets, or the ability to endure harsh conditions quietly until environments stabilized again. Life persists through adjustment. This principle appears repeatedly across natural history. During ice ages, organisms migrated or adapted to colder climates. When continents separated, isolated populations evolved independently. Following volcanic catastrophes, ecosystems slowly rebuilt themselves from surviving fragments. There is resilience woven deeply into the fabric of life. Not invulnerability, but resilience. Forests regrow after fire. Coral larvae drift into damaged reefs. Plants emerge through cracks in volcanic stone. Birds return after storms. Evolution works patiently with whatever remains, and patience may be one of nature's defining characteristics. Human civilization often measures time in days, years, or decades. Evolution measures in millennia and epochs. A rainforest may require centuries to recover fully from disturbance. Mountain ranges rise and erode across spans so immense they almost escape ordinary imagination. Against such scales, human worries can begin to feel lighter somehow. Not unimportant, but temporary within a much larger continuity. The stars visible tonight shone above prehistoric oceans. They shone above dinosaurs moving through fern forests. They shone above early humans painting cave walls by firelight. Long after modern cities change or disappear, many of those same stars will still remain overhead. Meanwhile, life on Earth will continue adapting beneath them, perhaps in forms impossible to predict. Evolution contains an element of unpredictability that makes the history of life feel almost dreamlike at times. Tiny random mutations, environmental accidents, asteroid impacts, and shifting climates can redirect entire evolutionary pathways. The difference between extinction and survival may depend upon seemingly small circumstances multiplied across time. If certain fish had never evolved stronger fins capable of supporting movement in shallow mudflats, land animals might never have emerged in the same way. If flowering plants had not spread successfully, ecosystems across Earth would look profoundly different today. If one primate lineage had not developed enhanced social cognition and symbolic language, human civilization may never have existed. The present world is only one version among countless evolutionary possibilities, and still, beneath all the variation, certain patterns recur throughout nature. Eyes evolved independently multiple times because vision offers enormous advantages. Wings appeared separately in insects, birds, bats, and extinct reptiles because flight repeatedly became useful. Similar environmental pressures often guide unrelated organisms towards surprisingly similar solutions. This phenomenon, known as convergent evolution, creates one of the most fascinating impressions in biology. Nature solving similar problems again and again through different pathways. Sharks and dolphins evolved streamlined bodies despite belonging to entirely separate branches of life. Certain desert plants resemble one another closely despite evolving on different continents. Even intelligence itself may represent a recurring evolutionary strategy under specific conditions. The universe appears filled with possibilities waiting to emerge wherever circumstances allow, and consciousness remains perhaps the strangest possibility of all. No one fully understands why subjective experience exists. Neural activity can be measured, brain regions can be mapped, yet the inner feeling of awareness itself, the experience of seeing moonlight, hearing rain, remembering childhood, or contemplating existence, remains deeply mysterious. Evolution produced consciousness gradually, but its ultimate nature still escapes complete explanation. Perhaps this mystery is part of what makes the study of life feel so endlessly absorbing. The more science uncovers, the more layers appear beneath previous understanding. Every answer opens new questions. How common might life be elsewhere in the universe? Could intelligence evolve differently on other worlds? What future forms might Earth's life eventually take millions of years from now? Will entirely new ecosystems emerge long after humanity is gone? No one knows, and there is peace in that uncertainty too. The evolutionary story remains unfinished. Tonight, forests breathe quietly in darkness. Whales move through black ocean water guided by ancient instincts. Insects drift beneath starlight. Microorganisms divide silently in soil, lakes, and deep underground rock formations. All across the planet, life continues its slow conversation with time, a conversation billions of years old, a conversation still unfolding within every living thing. There is a quiet continuity running through that conversation, as if life itself never truly pauses between one moment and the next. Even during sleep, evolution does not stop. It only shifts scale. Genes are still copied with slight variations, cells still divide, immune systems still learn from microscopic encounters. Inside every living body, countless biological processes continue their ancient routines without awareness, without hesitation, without need for observation. Life maintains itself in silence, and across the wider world, the same principle repeats. Evolution is not an event that begins or ends. It is an ongoing condition of existence for anything capable of reproduction and variation. What changes is only the pace at which it becomes visible. From the perspective of deep time, entire species appear briefly like passing thoughts in a much larger mind. Some endure for millions of years. Others vanish almost as soon as they appear in the fossil record. But even extinction is not an ending in the absolute sense. It is a transition of information, structure, and matter into new arrangements. The genetic story continues forward, reshaped into different forms. There is a kind of stillness within that process that can feel almost meditative when viewed without urgency. Nothing is rushing, even when change is constant. Mountains rise imperceptibly. Oceans shift their boundaries slowly. Continents drift at a pace too gradual to perceive without instruments. Life adapts at the same rhythm, sometimes faster in small populations, sometimes slower in stable environments, but always within the constraints of time itself. And time, in evolutionary terms, is not a backdrop. It is the medium through which all biological change becomes possible. Without time, there is no selection, no accumulation, no inheritance, only static existence. But Earth has never been static. From its earliest history, the planet has been shaped by transformation. Volcanoes once dominated its surface. Meteor impacts periodically reset ecological conditions. Ice ages expanded and retreated across hemispheres. Atmospheric composition shifted as life itself altered planetary chemistry. Evolution and Earth have always been intertwined systems. Neither can be fully understood in isolation. Even the formation of complex organs like the eye reflects this long interplay between environment and biology. Light-sensitive cells existed long before eyes formed. Over time, those cells organized into structures capable of detecting direction, movement, and eventually detailed images. The world of light shaped the organ that perceives it. In a sense, vision is Earth interpreting its own illumination through living tissue, and hearing is vibration translated into awareness through mechanical sensitivity refined across countless generations. Every sense is a negotiation between organism and environment. This interplay extends into behavior as well. Migration patterns, mating rituals, hunting strategies, and social hierarchies all emerge through the continuous feedback between survival needs and environmental conditions. Nothing in evolution exists in isolation. Every trait is a response to something else. Even intelligence, often regarded as the pinnacle of evolution, is not a destination but a strategy. It emerges when flexibility becomes more valuable than specialization. When environments change too rapidly for fixed instincts alone to suffice, adaptability through learning becomes advantageous. Memory becomes survival. Prediction becomes survival. Communication becomes survival. And eventually, abstract thought becomes survival. From this perspective, human intelligence is not separate from nature, but deeply embedded within it. A highly developed expression of the same adaptive principles that shaped wings, fins, camouflage, and symbiosis. What distinguishes humans is not removal from evolution, but acceleration within it. Culture allows information to evolve faster than genetics. Knowledge can be transmitted across generations without biological change. Tools, languages, and technologies adapt rapidly, reshaping environments in turn, and those environmental changes then feed back into biological pressures. Evolution becomes layered. Biological evolution continues. Cultural evolution accelerates alongside it, and both influence each other in increasingly complex ways. Yet despite this complexity, certain ancient patterns remain visible beneath modern life. Human emotional responses still reflect survival pressures from environments long gone. Fear, attachment, curiosity, and empathy remain deeply rooted in evolutionary history. Even the desire for meaning may arise from cognitive systems that evolve to detect patterns, predict outcomes, and construct coherence from uncertainty. The brain seeks structure because structure once improved survival, but in doing so, it also became capable of appreciating beauty, mystery, and contemplation without immediate practical purpose. This is one of evolution's quiet paradoxes. Mechanisms designed for survival can generate experiences that feel far beyond survival itself. A sunset becomes more than light scattering through atmosphere. It becomes emotion, memory, reflection, a sense of something larger than immediate existence. The same applies to music, art, storytelling, and science. Each is rooted in adaptive systems, yet each transcends its original function in ways that feel almost unexpected. Perhaps evolution does not move towards simplicity or complexity alone, but toward increasing layers of interpretation. Life not only responds to the world, but begins to represent it internally, refine it mentally, and eventually question it. At some point, evolution produced beings that can imagine futures that do not yet exist. This capacity reshapes behavior in profound ways. Humans plan, anticipate, and simulate possibilities across time. They construct mental models of events that may never occur. This ability brings both advantage and vulnerability. It allows preparation and innovation, but also worry and uncertainty. The future becomes emotionally real long before it arrives. And yet, despite this complexity, the evolutionary story remains grounded in physical reality. Every thought depends upon biological structures shaped by energy, chemistry, and history. Every feeling arises from neural activity influenced by inherited traits and environmental input. Even consciousness itself emerges from matter organized in a particular way. Atoms arranged into cells, cells arranged into networks, networks forming patterns of awareness. The same atoms that once existed in ancient stars now participate in thought. There is a quiet continuity in that realization. Nothing in evolution breaks the laws of physics. It simply explores the possibilities those laws allow over vast stretches of time, and within those possibilities, life has taken extraordinary forms. From microscopic organisms in boiling vents beneath the ocean floor, to towering forests that reshape climates, to migratory birds navigating continents using invisible magnetic fields, to whales communicating across thousands of kilometers of deep water. Each form represents a different solution to existence. Each solution temporary, yet meaningful within its own context. And perhaps meaning itself is something that emerges only through perspective. The universe does not assign significance in advance. Significance arises when conscious beings observe, reflect, and connect patterns across time. A fossil becomes meaningful because someone recognizes continuity between past and present. A migrating bird becomes meaningful because it reveals endurance across generations. A human life becomes meaningful because it exists within a vast lineage stretching backward through evolution and forward into unknown futures. In that sense, meaning is not outside nature. It is part of nature becoming aware of itself. And as night continues to deepen, and the world grows quieter again, evolution continues its patient work without interruption. Life persists, changes accumulate. History unfolds in increments too small to notice in the moment. Yet across billions of years, those increments build everything that exists now, including the awareness listening to this story, including the silence that follows it. And in that silence, something subtle becomes easier to notice. Life has never been moving toward a final destination, not in the way human thinking often imagines progress. There is no endpoint where evolution completes itself, no final form waiting at the end of time. Instead, there are only continuous adjustments, each generation responding to conditions that exist only briefly in geological terms. What seems stable is only temporarily stable. What seems permanent is only slow-moving change. Even environments that feel unchanging to human perception are constantly shifting at scales too gradual to detect in a single lifetime. Soil composition changes, climate patterns drift, species compositions fluctuate, invisible pressures accumulate across centuries until entire ecosystems reorganize themselves. Evolution is always responding to something, and that response never truly stops. There is a quiet humility in recognizing this. It places every living organism, including humans, inside a process that has no central control, no fixed direction, and no final design. Yet despite that lack of direction, complexity still emerges, structure still forms. Life still diversifies into astonishing variety. The absence of intention does not prevent richness. If anything, it seems to allow it. Because nothing in evolution is constrained by a predetermined outcome, countless possibilities remain open at every stage. Small variations can lead to entirely new branches of life. A slight change in temperature tolerance, a minor shift in reproductive timing, a subtle alteration in feeding behavior. All of these can redirect evolutionary trajectories over long enough periods. This is how Earth became so biologically intricate, not through planning, but through accumulation, layer upon layer of change, preserved and modified across immense spans of time. And yet, within that vast complexity, certain constraints remain constant. Energy must be obtained. Reproduction must succeed. Information must be transmitted across generations. These basic requirements shape all living systems, no matter how different they appear on the surface. From bacteria to blue whales, from mosses to humans, life shares these fundamental demands. This shared foundation creates a kind of unity beneath diversity. It also explains why similar solutions arise independently in different branches of life. Eyes, wings, echolocation, cooperative hunting, social structures. These features emerge repeatedly because they solve recurring problems in existence. Evolution explores the space of possibility, but within the boundaries of physical law, and within those boundaries, it experiments endlessly. Some experiments last for hundreds of millions of years. Others fail within a few generations. Most leave no visible trace. Only a fraction becomes fossilized, and an even smaller fraction is eventually discovered and interpreted. The history of life we know is only a partial reconstruction, a faint outline of something vastly larger and more complex than what remains in stone. Still, even that partial outline reveals a consistent theme: change layered upon change, guided by interaction rather than intention. And perhaps this is where evolution begins to feel almost reflective when observed closely, because it mirrors something recognizable in human experience. Individuals also change over time in ways they do not fully control. Thoughts shift, habits form, memories accumulate, relationships influence behavior, environments shape personality in subtle but lasting ways. Personal history becomes a kind of small-scale evolution, not genetic, but experiential. The brain reorganizes itself through learning and repetition. Neural pathways strengthen or weaken depending on use. Over time, even perception is shaped by accumulated experience. Two people can witness the same environment and interpret it differently based on their internal history. In this sense, consciousness is never separate from change. It is part of it, and it is shaped by it continuously. Even sleep, often seen as stillness, plays a role in this ongoing transformation. During sleep, the brain reorganizes memory, processes emotional experiences, and clears metabolic byproducts accumulated during wakefulness. Beneath awareness, adjustment continues. The organism never fully pauses. Life maintains its trajectory even in rest. And across evolutionary time, rest itself may have been shaped as an adaptation that improved survival. Species that balanced activity with recovery gained advantages in energy efficiency, cognitive function, and resilience. Over millions of years, sleep became deeply embedded in biology across many forms of life. Even birds and marine mammals have evolved specialized forms of sleep that allow partial awareness while resting. Some dolphins rest one hemisphere of the brain at a time, maintaining vigilance while still recovering neurologically. Life finds ways to continue existing under nearly every constraint. This adaptability extends into extreme environments as well. In freezing polar waters, antifreeze proteins allow fish to survive temperatures that would normally cause ice crystals to form in their bodies. In deserts, certain plants and animals endure long periods without water by entering dormant states. In deep oceans, life persists under crushing pressure and total darkness, relying on chemical energy sources rather than sunlight. There is almost no environment on Earth entirely devoid of life. This resilience suggests something fundamental about biology. Given sufficient time and variation, life tends to occupy whatever space is available to it, not through intention, but through persistence. Across evolutionary history, persistence has often mattered more than dominance. Species that survive major disruptions are frequently those capable of enduring temporary hardship, adapting slowly, or remaining unnoticed until conditions improve. Small populations sheltered in isolated environments sometimes become the seed of future biodiversity after catastrophic events reset ecosystems. What appears insignificant in one era can become foundational in another. Time changes context, and context changes survival. This shifting relationship between organism and environment means that no adaptation is permanently optimal. What works well in one climate, one geological period, or one ecological system may become disadvantageous in another. Evolution is therefore always provisional, always revising, always responding. Even human technology now participates in this ongoing process. Agriculture reshapes plant evolution. Urban environments create new selective pressures for animals and microorganisms. Medicine influences survival patterns, indirectly affecting genetic variation across populations. Human activity has become a geological force in itself, altering ecosystems at planetary scale. Yet even this influence remains part of the broader evolutionary system rather than separate from it. Life continues adjusting to human presence, just as it has adjusted to volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and shifting continents. Adaptation continues on all sides, and still, beneath these rapid changes, the deeper timeline of evolution remains steady, slow, uninterrupted, unfolding. There is a kind of quiet continuity in recognizing this, a sense that everything alive today is connected not only through ancestry, but through shared participation in an ongoing process that began long before memory and will continue long after it fades. Every organism is a temporary expression of something much older, and yet each one is also unique, shaped by a specific combination of history, environment, and chance that will never repeat in exactly the same way again. Life is both repetitive and singular at once, a pattern that continues, and a moment that never returns. And as this long, unfolding story continues beneath night skies, across forests and oceans, through soil and stone, evolution carries on without interruption, quietly shaping the next forms of life that have not yet appeared, and preserving the ancient threads that connect everything still living to everything that came before. And somewhere within that ongoing continuity, a final quiet realization begins to take shape. Evolution does not move like a straight line through time. It moves more like a vast branching landscape, expanding in every direction where life can take hold. Some branches grow thick and enduring, shaping entire ecosystems for millions of years. Others remain small, delicate, and easily erased by environmental change. Most branches end without warning, not because they failed in any absolute sense, but because conditions shifted beyond what they could tolerate. Extinction, in this sense, is not an exception. It is part of the structure itself. But what remains after each ending is never nothing. It is transformation, energy redistributed, matter reorganized, genetic information either lost or carried forward in new forms. Even disappearance becomes part of continuity. And through this continuity, life keeps exploring the possibilities of existence as if it is gradually mapping a vast, unseen space of forms, behaviors, and strategies. Some of those explorations lead toward extreme specialization, others toward flexibility, some toward cooperation so intricate that individual organisms become interdependent systems, others toward isolation and independence. There is no single direction guiding all of it, only variation interacting with circumstance. And yet, despite this lack of direction, certain patterns of increasing complexity appear repeatedly across Earth's history. Simple replicating systems give rise to more structured cellular life. Cellular life forms networks of cooperation. Networks of organisms create ecosystems. Ecosystems develop layers of interdependence that stabilize over long periods of time. Complexity emerges not as a goal, but as a consequence of interaction across time. Still, simplicity never disappears entirely. It remains alongside complexity, always present in microscopic forms of life that continue to thrive in environments unchanged for billions of years. In this way, Earth holds both ancient simplicity and modern complexity simultaneously, layered across different scales of existence. This layering gives evolution a kind of depth that is not purely biological, but temporal. Every living system today is surrounded by echoes of its past. Inside cells, ancient molecular mechanisms continue to operate almost unchanged from the earliest life forms. In the structure of proteins, in the replication of DNA, in the basic chemistry of energy transfer, the past is still active. It is not merely remembered, it is functioning, and outside the body, landscapes carry similar traces. River valleys shaped by ice ages, mountain ranges formed by tectonic collisions millions of years ago, ocean currents guided by planetary geometry established long before humans appeared. The present is never separate from its history. It is built upon it continuously. Even perception itself depends on this accumulation. The brain does not experience the world as it is in isolation, but as a filtered interpretation shaped by both evolution and individual memory. What is seen, heard, and felt is the result of countless prior adaptations that allowed survival in environments very different from the present one. Vision, for example, is not simply a passive recording of light. It is an active construction. The brain selects, organizes, and interprets signals based on patterns that were useful for ancestral survival. This is why illusions can occur, and why perception can be influenced by expectation, attention, and context. Reality, as experienced, is always partially shaped by biology, and biology is shaped by time. This creates a layered relationship between existence and awareness. The world influences life. Life influences perception. Perception influences behavior. Behavior influences environment, and the cycle continues, generation after generation, across scales too large to fully comprehend. Within that cycle, even small changes can accumulate into profound outcomes. A slight increase in cooperation among early organisms may lead to entirely new ecological structures. A minor shift in environmental stability may allow species to diversify into unexpected forms. A single adaptation may open pathways that were previously inaccessible. Evolution often turns on subtle differences, not dramatic ones. Subtle ones repeated endlessly, and because of this, the history of life is filled with moments that could have gone in many different directions. Branch points where outcomes depended on chance, timing, and environmental alignment rather than inevitability. This makes the present world feel less like a fixed result and more like one surviving version among many possibilities, a world that happened to persist and continues to persist only because conditions still allow it. Yet even as conditions change, life responds. It always responds. Across deserts, forests, oceans, tundra, caves, and urban environments, organisms continue adjusting to new realities. Some shift behaviors, some migrate, some alter reproductive timing. Others develop physiological changes that allow survival under new pressures. Adaptation is constant, and it does not require awareness. It only requires variation and time. In this way, evolution continues silently beneath everything visible, shaping not only the diversity of life, but its capacity to endure change itself. There is a certain calmness in recognizing this persistence. It suggests that instability is not unusual in nature. It is the norm. Stability exists, but only temporarily, within longer cycles of transformation. Even the most stable ecosystems are still in motion when observed across sufficient time, and this motion extends beyond Earth as well. The same physical laws that shape evolution here also govern the chemistry of distant planets, the formation of stars, and the structure of galaxies. Matter organizes itself into increasingly complex forms wherever conditions allow, from atomic clouds to planetary systems to biological life. Evolution, in its broadest sense, may not be confined to Earth at all. It may be one expression of a universal tendency for systems to change, adapt, and reorganize over time. On Earth, that tendency has produced forests, oceans filled with life, and minds capable of reflection, minds that can observe the process itself. And perhaps that is the most unusual outcome of all, that within a universe governed by physical laws and slow transformation, structures can emerge that are able to recognize those laws and reflect upon their own existence. This awareness does not alter evolution, but it adds another layer to it, a layer of observation, a layer of interpretation, a layer of meaning that exists only because life has become complex enough to perceive itself within time. And as night deepens once more, the same evolutionary processes continue without pause beneath the surface of all things. Cells divide, ecosystems adjust, species respond, invisible changes accumulate across generations. Nothing stops, nothing resets. Everything continues, quietly, continuously, and without direction other than the unfolding of life itself through time that has no beginning the mind can fully hold, and no final endpoint it can clearly see. And yet, even without a beginning that can be fully grasped, evolution still carries a kind of coherence when viewed from far enough away. Not a plan, not a direction, but a continuity that links every living moment to the one before it. A thread that never quite breaks, even when entire species vanish, even when climates collapse, Even when oceans shift and continents rearrange themselves across unimaginable spans of time, what remains is the underlying ability of life to continue responding, to adjust, to persist, to try again in new forms. Across Earth's history, this persistence has taken countless shapes. In some eras it appears as microbial simplicity dominating the planet, quietly shaping atmospheric chemistry. In others it appears as vast forests, or sprawling marine ecosystems, or complex networks of animals interacting across land and sea. At no point does life remain fixed. It only reorganizes, and this reorganization often begins at scales too small to notice. A single mutation, a slight advantage in survival, a tiny shift in reproductive timing. These small differences, repeated across populations and generations, slowly reshape entire lineages. Time does the rest. Time allows small differences to become large ones. And because time is so immense in evolutionary terms, almost anything that can be sustained long enough eventually leaves a mark. Even extinction does not erase everything. It leaves traces embedded in the structures that survive: genetic fragments, anatomical similarities, ecological echoes. The absence of certain forms becomes itself a kind of information, pointing toward what once existed. The history of life is therefore not only a record of what remains, but also of what is gone. Silence becomes part of the narrative, and within that narrative, certain transitions stand out not because they are sudden, but because they are deeply transformative over long periods. The emergence of multicellular life from single-celled organisms, the development of nervous systems capable of sensing and responding to the environment, the rise of complex brains capable of memory, prediction, and learning. Each transition unfolds gradually, without clear boundaries. From one perspective, there is no moment when a species suddenly becomes something entirely new. There is only accumulation across generations until difference becomes so significant that continuity is only visible through deep comparison. This is one of the most subtle aspects of evolution. Change is continuous, but recognition of change is retrospective. It becomes visible only when viewed from a distance of time. Even the distinction between species is not always as sharp as it appears. In many cases, populations diverge gradually, with intermediate forms existing for long periods before full separation occurs. And in some cases, genetic exchange continues between groups that are considered distinct, blurring the boundaries further. Nature does not draw clean lines, human classification does. And classification is a tool of understanding, not a reflection of rigid separation. Underneath all categories, life remains fluid. This fluidity is especially evident when examining the fossil record. There are long periods where change appears subtle, followed by intervals where diversity expands rapidly after environmental shifts or mass extinctions. These patterns reveal that evolution is not uniform in pace, but responsive to external conditions. When ecosystems are stable, change accumulates slowly. When conditions are disrupted, change accelerates as life adapts to new realities. Yet even these accelerations remain grounded in the same fundamental process: variation filtered through survival over time. No mechanism beyond that is required. And still, the outcomes are astonishing. From microscopic beginnings, Earth has developed into a planet covered in interconnected ecosystems, each shaped by billions of years of interaction. Every forest, every ocean current, every insect colony, every migrating herd is part of this vast unfolding system. Even human societies are now interwoven into these ecological patterns. Agriculture, urbanization, transportation networks, and energy systems all interact with natural cycles in ways that influence evolutionary pressures across multiple species. The boundary between natural and artificial systems is increasingly difficult to define, because both are ultimately expressions of the same planetary processes: life adapting to life, matter reorganizing matter, energy flowing through changing structures, and beneath it all, time continuing without interruption. There is something quietly stabilizing in recognizing that even profound change is part of continuity. Nothing in evolution exists outside of transformation. Stability is only a temporary balance within ongoing motion. Mountains appear permanent, yet they rise and erode. Species appear fixed, yet they drift and diverge. Even entire ecosystems can shift into entirely different states over long periods, and yet life itself continues. This continuity suggests that resilience is not located in any single form, but in the process as a whole. No individual species is guaranteed survival across all conditions, but life, as a system, repeatedly finds ways to persist through changing circumstances, sometimes through diversification, sometimes through simplicity, sometimes through dormancy, sometimes through expansion. It does not rely on a single strategy. It explores many simultaneously, and in doing so, it fills almost every available niche on Earth, from the deepest ocean trenches to the highest mountain slopes, from frozen polar regions to scorching deserts, from underground microbial networks to airborne spores drifting across continents. Life is everywhere conditions allow it to exist, and often, even where conditions seem extreme, life finds subtle ways to endure. This adaptability creates a sense of quiet persistence running through the entire history of evolution. Not urgency, not direction, but endurance, a steady unfolding that continues regardless of outcome. Even mass extinction events, which reset much of the planet's biodiversity, do not interrupt the underlying process, they reshape it. After each major disruption, new forms arise from survivors, gradually rebuilding complexity over time. The story continues, but the cast changes, and in that sense, evolution is both fragile and indestructible. Fragile in its dependence on conditions at any given moment, indestructible in its capacity to continue as long as any form of life remains. As long as there is reproduction, variation, and time, evolution persists. And on Earth, those conditions have never fully disappeared, not once, which means that through every catastrophe, every climate shift, every geological upheaval, life has always found at least a small foothold from which to continue. That continuity stretches forward into the present moment as well. In every breath taken, in every heartbeat, in every cell dividing quietly within the body, the same ancient process continues, a process that began long before memory, and will likely continue long after any single form of life has vanished or transformed into something unrecognizable. And so, beneath the stillness of the night, beneath the slow turning of the planet, beneath the vast and patient movement of time itself, evolution continues not as a story with an ending, but as an ongoing expression of life's ability to remain in motion, always changing, always adapting, always continuing. And in that continuing motion, there is a deeper layer that becomes easier to sense when the mind grows quiet enough to observe it without interruption. Evolution is not only something that happened in the past, it is something that is still happening in every living system, at every scale, at every moment. Even now, in the smallest regions of Earth's biosphere, change is being tested through countless microscopic trials. Bacteria reproduce rapidly, and within those rapid cycles, variation emerges constantly. Some variations fail immediately. Others persist long enough to be shaped by environment. A few continue forward, altering the trajectory of entire populations in ways invisible to the human eye. This is evolution at its most immediate speed, not geological, not historical, but present, happening now. At the same time, larger organisms experience evolution on slower scales, where changes are distributed across generations rather than moments. Animals, plants, and fungi carry genetic instructions that are refined gradually over time, responding to pressures that accumulate across seasons, decades, and centuries. These two scales exist simultaneously, one fast, one slow, both continuous, and both governed by the same underlying principle. But what makes this process so extraordinary is not its mechanism alone. It is what emerges from it over immense stretches of time. From simple beginnings, complexity arises again and again in different forms, as if life is exploring the space of what biology can become, not toward perfection, not toward a final form, but toward diversification, toward possibility, toward the unfolding of countless branches, each shaped by its own environment, its own constraints, its own history. This branching pattern is visible everywhere in the natural world when viewed through deep time. Fossil records show repeated radiations of species following environmental shifts. Genetic studies reveal shared ancestry linking organisms that appear entirely different on the surface. Anatomical comparisons uncover deep structural similarities beneath outward variation. The same story repeats at different scales, change accumulating, lineages diverging, forms adapting, extinctions pruning entire branches, and new growth emerging from what remains. In this sense, evolution resembles a forest that is never still. Some parts are growing upward, some are decaying, some are falling, some are being reshaped by wind, fire, water, or time itself. Yet the forest persists as a system, even as its individual components continuously change. And Earth itself can be understood in a similar way. A living planet shaped by interactions between geology, climate, chemistry, and biology, all influencing one another across immense timescales. The atmosphere is not separate from life. It has been shaped by it. Oxygen levels, carbon cycles, and even soil composition have been transformed by biological activity over billions of years. Life did not simply adapt to Earth. It helped create the conditions under which later life could exist. This feedback loop between organism and environment is one of the most profound features of evolution. Life changes the world changes life, and the cycle continues. Even now, forests influence rainfall patterns. Oceans regulate climate. Microorganisms cycle nutrients through ecosystems. Animals transport seeds across continents. Insects pollinate plants that shape entire landscapes. Each component participates in a network of interactions that sustains the broader system. Nothing exists in isolation, and yet each organism experiences existence as a singular point of awareness, shaped by its own sensory boundaries. For most species, that awareness is simple, focused on immediate survival needs: food, shelter, reproduction, safety. But in some lineages, particularly among mammals and birds, more complex forms of cognition evolved. Memory expanded, learning deepened, social structures became more intricate. And in one lineage on Earth, cognition developed to a point where abstract reflection became possible. Humans did not step outside evolution to achieve this. They emerged from it. Every aspect of human thought, from emotion to reasoning to imagination, is built upon structures shaped by evolutionary pressures that operated long before language existed. Fear responses originate from ancient survival mechanisms. Attachment behaviors emerge from social bonding systems that increased offspring survival. Curiosity may have evolved because exploration improved access to resources and knowledge. Even abstract thinking rests upon neural systems originally designed for perception, movement, and interaction with the environment. Nothing in the human mind is separate from biology, but biology itself is the product of evolution, which means that even thoughts about evolution are part of evolution. This creates a recursive loop of remarkable depth, a system that evolves to observe its own evolution. In scientific history, this realization unfolded gradually as evidence accumulated from many fields. Fossils revealed extinct forms of life. Comparative anatomy showed structural similarities between species. Genetics uncovered shared molecular codes across all living organisms. Each discovery added another layer to the understanding that life is connected through time, not separated into isolated categories. And yet, even with all this knowledge, evolution remains far from fully understood. Many details of how complex systems first emerged from simpler ones are still being studied. The origins of life itself remain an active scientific question. The transition from non-living chemistry to self-replicating systems is still not completely explained. Mystery still exists at the foundation, and perhaps it always will, at least in part, because evolution is not a static object that can be fully captured. It is a process unfolding across time, and any attempt to describe it is limited by the perspective of the moment in which it is observed. Still, what can be seen is already vast. From microscopic molecular changes to planetary-scale ecological shifts, evolution operates across every level of biological organization. And despite its scale, It is built on remarkably simple principles: variation, inheritance, selection, time. From these four elements, all the diversity of life on Earth has emerged. Forests filled with interconnected organisms, oceans inhabited by creatures adapted to lightless depths, skies crossed by migrating birds navigating invisible pathways, landscapes shaped by species interacting in countless ways, and human civilizations built upon accumulated biological and cultural inheritance, all of it arising from the same foundational process and continuing through the present moment without interruption. Even as environments shift and conditions change, life remains responsive. It adjusts, adapts, persists, and explores new configurations as opportunities arise. This responsiveness is what defines evolution more than any specific outcome, not direction, not purpose, but continual adjustment across time. And as long as time continues, so too does the unfolding of life into new and unexpected forms, quietly, gradually, without pause. And within that uninterrupted unfolding, there is another perspective that becomes visible only when evolution is stretched far beyond the scale of individual lifetimes, beyond even civilizations, into the immense architecture of deep time. From that distance, life begins to resemble a shifting pattern rather than a collection of separate events, a pattern that expands, contracts, fragments, and reconnects across epochs. At times, biodiversity increases dramatically, filling the planet with abundant and varied forms of life. At other times, it contracts sharply, as mass extinctions remove vast portions of existing species in relatively short geological intervals. Then, over millions of years, diversity gradually rebuilds again, often in entirely new directions. This cyclical rhythm is not predictable in detail, but it is consistent in structure: expansion, disruption, reorganization, recovery, and then expansion again in altered form. Each cycle leaves behind a transformed world, not erased, but reshaped, and within each reshaping, evolutionary pathways open and close like branching corridors in an endlessly reconfiguring maze. Some lineages persist through multiple cycles, carrying ancient traits forward almost unchanged. Others appear briefly in the fossil record and disappear entirely, leaving only fragments behind. Still others diversify rapidly after ecological openings, filling newly available niches with remarkable speed. This dynamic creates the impression that life is constantly experimenting, not with intention, but through endless variation under shifting conditions. And over immense time, these experiments accumulate into the extraordinary diversity seen on Earth today. But what is perhaps most striking is not the diversity itself, but the underlying continuity that connects all of it. Every living organism, no matter how different in form or function, shares a fundamental biological heritage. At the cellular level, the machinery of life is deeply conserved. Energy production, genetic replication, and molecular signaling follow patterns that trace back to the earliest forms of life on the planet. This continuity suggests that evolution does not discard its history completely. Instead, it builds upon it, layer by layer, modification upon modification, until structures become so complex that their origins are visible only through careful reconstruction. This is why comparative biology is so revealing. By examining similarities in anatomy, genetics, and development, scientists can trace relationships between species that diverged hundreds of millions of years ago. A whale's flipper, a bat's wing, and a human arm all share underlying structural patterns inherited from a distant common ancestor. The differences are adaptations to different environments, but the foundation remains recognizable. This is one of the quiet signatures of evolution: divergence built upon shared origin. Even at the molecular level, the same principle applies. DNA serves as a universal code across nearly all known life on Earth. The sequence of nucleotides may vary, but the language remains consistent. This allows genetic information to be passed, modified, and expressed across generations with extraordinary fidelity, while still allowing room for variation. It is this balance between stability and change that makes evolution possible. Too much stability, and life would not adapt. Too much change, and continuity would break. Evolution exists in the space between those extremes, and that space has remained active for billions of years. Over that vast timescale, Earth has transformed repeatedly. Continents have merged and separated, oceans have opened and closed, atmospheres have shifted in composition, climate systems have oscillated between stability and extreme volatility. Life has persisted through all of it, not unchanged, but continuously adapting. In some periods, life has reshaped the planet so significantly that Earth itself enters a new biological era. Oxygenation events altered atmospheric chemistry permanently. The emergence of land plants transformed erosion patterns and carbon cycles. Coral reefs created massive limestone structures that still influence modern geology. In this sense, evolution is not only a biological process, it is also a geological force. And at certain points in history, biological change has driven planetary change. Yet despite these immense transformations, the underlying simplicity of evolutionary mechanisms remains constant. Variation arises, traits are inherited, environmental pressures influence survival. Time allows accumulation. From this simplicity, complexity emerges again and again. And because of this repetition across deep time, the natural world can sometimes feel both ancient and continuously new at the same time. Ancient because its origins extend far beyond human history. New because it is always in the process of becoming something slightly different from what it was before. Every moment contains both inheritance and novelty. Every generation carries forward the past while introducing subtle differences that will shape the future. This duality is one of the most fundamental aspects of life. Nothing is ever entirely repeated. Nothing is ever entirely erased. Instead, existence moves forward as a continuous transformation of what has already existed. Even extinction, often perceived as an ending, fits within this framework. When a species disappears, its genetic legacy may persist indirectly through related lineages. Its ecological role may be replaced by new organisms occupying similar niches. Its physical remains may become part of geological formations that influence future environments. Absence itself becomes part of structure, and structure shapes what comes next. In this way, evolution is not only a record of life, but also a record of loss, transformation, and renewal. A layered history written in both presence and absence. And within that layered history, there are moments when life appears to accelerate in diversity and complexity, often following major disruptions. After mass extinctions, surviving organisms encounter environments with reduced competition and newly available ecological space. This can lead to rapid diversification over geological timescales. New forms emerge, old constraints dissolve, and evolutionary pathways expand in unexpected directions. This pattern has repeated multiple times in Earth's history, each time reshaping the trajectory of life in profound ways. Yet even these dramatic shifts are ultimately expressions of the same underlying process, operating continuously beneath them. Change responding to change, life responding to life, environment responding to life, and life responding back again. It is a system without external direction, yet one that continuously generates structure, complexity, and diversity through internal interaction over time. And as this system continues, it also generates beings capable of reflecting upon it. Beings that can reconstruct ancient ecosystems from fossils, decode genetic histories from molecular sequences, and model evolutionary processes across millions of years using mathematical frameworks. Beings that can recognize themselves as participants within the system they are studying. This reflective capacity is rare in the history of life, but it does not exist outside of evolution. It is an extension of cognitive development shaped by survival, communication, and environmental complexity. And through it, evolution becomes not only a process that shapes life, but also a subject that life can observe, a process becoming aware of itself through its own outcomes. As night continues its quiet progression, this awareness remains within a single fragile biological form among billions of others, all participating in the same ancient continuity, breathing, adapting, persisting, and carrying forward the long unfolding story of life across time that stretches far beyond any single moment of understanding. And as that long unfolding continues, there is a final layer of perspective that begins to emerge when evolution is viewed not only through the lens of biology, but through the broader rhythm of existence itself. Life does not exist in isolation from the planet that hosts it. It is shaped by the planet, and, in turn, it reshapes the planet continuously. This reciprocal relationship extends far beyond simple survival. It is embedded in chemistry, in climate, in geology, and in the slow movement of Earth's systems across time. The atmosphere that surrounds the planet today is not the same atmosphere that existed before life became widespread. Oceans have been altered by biological activity. Soil itself is, in many ways, a product of long interaction between living organisms and rock, water, and time. Even the very cycles that regulate temperature and carbon are influenced by life. In this sense, evolution is not merely a process happening on Earth. It is part of how Earth behaves. And because of this, the history of life becomes inseparable from the history of the planet itself. The two are written together, layer upon layer, in sediment, ice, rock, and fossilized remains. What once lived becomes part of what exists, and what exists shapes what can live next. This continuity creates a kind of planetary memory, preserved not in conscious recollection, but in physical structure. Ancient climates are recorded in ice cores. Past atmospheres are trapped in bubbles of air frozen for thousands of years. Extinct ecosystems are preserved in stone like compressed echoes of former worlds. Through these records, it becomes possible to trace not only how life evolved, but how Earth itself changed alongside it. And within that long record, there are moments of profound transformation. Times when environmental conditions shifted so dramatically that life was forced into entirely new configurations. Some of these transitions were gradual, unfolding over millions of years. Others were abrupt in geological terms, triggered by sudden events such as asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, or rapid climatic shifts. Yet even in the aftermath of disruption, life never ceased entirely. It reorganized, it adapted, it continued. This resilience is one of the most consistent features of evolution across Earth's history. No matter how extreme the conditions become, some forms of life persist, often in reduced numbers, often in hidden or isolated environments, but always enough to preserve continuity. And from that continuity, new diversity eventually emerges. This pattern suggests that life is not fragile in the absolute sense, but rather fragile in form and resilient in process. Individual species may vanish, entire ecosystems may collapse, but life itself, as a phenomenon, continues to reappear in new arrangements wherever conditions allow. Even today, in environments far removed from sunlight, life persists in unexpected ways. Deep beneath the ocean floor, microbial communities exist in sediments that have been isolated for immense periods of time. Around hydrothermal vents, ecosystems thrive in conditions once thought entirely incompatible with biology, relying not on sunlight but on chemical energy from Earth's interior. These environments expand the definition of where life can exist, and with each discovery, the boundaries of biology expand further. This expanding understanding reshapes how evolution is perceived. It is no longer confined to familiar landscapes of forests and plains, but extends into subterranean rock, deep ocean trenches, and microscopic chemical environments invisible to the human eye. Life is not limited to the surface. It is distributed throughout layers of the planet, interacting with physical systems at multiple depths and scales. And across all of these environments, the same fundamental principle remains constant: adaptation over time. But adaptation does not occur in isolation. It is shaped by interaction. Species influence one another continuously. Predators and prey evolve in response to each other. Parasites and hosts engage in long-term biological exchange. Plants and pollinators develop interdependent relationships that shape morphology, behavior, and timing. These interactions form networks of evolutionary influence that extend across entire ecosystems. No species evolves alone. Each is part of a larger web of relationships that spans generations. And this web itself evolves over time. As environments shift, relationships change. new connections form, old ones disappear. Entire ecological structures reorganize in response to external pressures and internal dynamics. This makes evolution not only a story of species, but also a story of relationships, a story of connection. And perhaps this is where the sense of unity within nature becomes most visible. Despite the vast diversity of life, everything is linked through interaction, dependency, and shared origin. Every organism is part of multiple overlapping systems, each operating across different scales of time and space. A single tree is part of a forest ecosystem, a carbon cycle, a soil network, a climate system, and a long evolutionary lineage stretching back millions of years. Even the simplest organism participates in multiple layers of existence simultaneously. And yet, each experiences life only from its own limited perspective. This contrast between interconnectedness and individual experience is one of the most subtle features of life. The system is unified. The perception is individual. From a human perspective, this creates a unique form of awareness. The ability to recognize patterns across time allows for reflection on existence itself. The capacity to reconstruct the history of life from fossils, DNA, and comparative anatomy allows for an understanding of deep continuity. But this understanding is still emerging. It is not complete. There remain vast gaps in knowledge about the earliest origins of life, about the precise pathways that led from simple chemical systems to self-replicating organisms, and about the full complexity of extinct ecosystems that left only partial traces behind. Science continues to explore these questions, gradually expanding the scope of what is known. Yet even as knowledge grows, the scale of what remains unknown remains immense. This imbalance between understanding and mystery is not a flaw in knowledge. It is a reflection of the depth of the subject itself. Evolution spans billions of years, countless species, and countless interactions across every environment on Earth. No single perspective can fully contain it. Still, the parts that are known already reveal something profound. Life is continuous, interconnected, adaptive, and persistent across time beyond ordinary comprehension. From microscopic organisms dividing in hidden environments to vast ecosystems spanning entire continents, the same underlying principles remain active: variation, inheritance, selection, time. And through these principles, life continues to explore new forms, new strategies, and new ways of existing within the constraints of the planet. Even now, at this moment, evolution is not resting. It is ongoing in every habitat, in every ecosystem, in every generation being born and shaped by conditions that existed just slightly before it. And within that continuous unfolding, Earth remains a living archive of everything that has come before, a planet still writing its own biological history, quietly, continuously, without end. And within that ongoing writing of Earth's biological history, there is a perspective that becomes especially clear when the scale is stretched far enough that individual lives are no longer the focus. Instead, what remains visible is movement, not the movement of a single organism, but the movement of entire systems across time. Populations shifting, ecosystems reorganizing, climates changing, and life responding at every level, adjusting its structure to match new conditions as they emerge. From this distance, evolution appears less like a sequence of events and more like a continuous flow of adjustment, a flow that never stops. Even when it seems paused from a human point of view, it is still active beneath the surface. Genetic variation continues to arise. Environmental pressures continue to shift. Subtle changes accumulate in ways that may only become visible after many generations have passed. This slow accumulation is what gives evolution its depth. It is not defined by sudden transformation, but by the layering of small differences over time. And those small differences are often invisible in the moment they occur. A slight advantage in survival, a minor improvement in efficiency, a behavioral change that increases reproductive success in a specific environment. None of these alone appears significant, but across thousands or millions of generations, they reshape entire lineages. This is why evolution is so difficult to perceive directly. It operates beneath the threshold of immediate awareness. It requires time to reveal itself. And time, in evolutionary terms, is vast beyond ordinary comprehension. Species that exist today occupy only a narrow window within a much larger temporal landscape. Before them were other species. After them will be others again. The continuity of life stretches far beyond any single moment in that sequence. Even the concept of present becomes less fixed when viewed through this lens. What is present biologically is always already in transition towards something else. Nothing remains static. Everything is in motion, and yet, within that motion, there is structure. Patterns repeat across different eras of Earth's history. Ecosystems rise, diversify, and eventually shift into new configurations. Species radiate into available ecological spaces, then gradually decline as conditions change. New forms emerge from remnants of older systems. This repetition does not imply repetition of exact outcomes, but rather repetition of process. The same mechanisms producing different results under different conditions. Variation interacting with environment. Inheritance carrying information forward. Selection filtering outcomes across time. And through these mechanisms, life continues to reorganize itself endlessly. At times, this reorganization produces remarkable stability. Certain ecosystems persist for long periods with relatively consistent structures, allowing species within them to specialize and refine adaptations over time. At other times, stability breaks down, and rapid change becomes the dominant feature of the environment. During these periods, adaptability becomes more important than specialization, and evolutionary shifts can occur more quickly in geological terms. Both states are part of the same system. Stability and change are not opposites in evolution. They are alternating expressions of the same underlying dynamics. Even extinction events, often perceived as disruptions, are part of this broader rhythm. They reset ecological structures, remove dominant lineages, and open space for new forms of life to emerge. From the perspective of deep time, extinction is not an ending, but a reconfiguration, a clearing of pathways that allows different possibilities to unfold. And those possibilities are not predetermined. They depend on the surviving organisms, the environmental conditions, and the random variations that exist at the time of transition. This is why the history of life cannot be reduced to a single predictable trajectory. It is shaped by contingency as much as by necessity. Small differences in early conditions can lead to vastly different outcomes over time. A change in ocean chemistry, a shift in atmospheric composition, or a variation in temperature patterns can alter evolutionary pathways in ways that accumulate across millions of years. The present world is one realization among many potential histories that could have unfolded under different circumstances. And yet, despite this variability, life continues to produce complexity wherever it persists long enough. From simple replicating systems to intricate ecosystems, from microscopic organisms to highly structured multicellular life, complexity emerges repeatedly under suitable conditions, not because it is required, but because it becomes possible through accumulation and interaction. This emergence of complexity is one of the most consistent features of evolution across Earth's history. And within that complexity, certain recurring patterns appear. Cooperation evolves alongside competition. Specialization evolves alongside flexibility. Symbiosis evolves alongside independence. Life does not follow a single strategy. It explores multiple strategies simultaneously, each suited to different environmental contexts. This diversity of strategies is part of what allows life to persist through changing conditions. When one approach becomes less effective, others remain viable. When environments shift, different adaptations become advantageous. This distributed flexibility contributes to the long-term resilience of life as a whole. And yet, beneath all of these variations, the underlying continuity remains intact. Genetic information passes from one generation to the next. Cells replicate, organisms reproduce, populations change over time, and evolution continues without interruption. Even in environments that appear stable from a human perspective, subtle changes are constantly occurring. Mutations arise, selection pressures shift slightly. Ecological interactions adjust in response to small environmental variations. Nothing is ever fully still. Even what appears unchanged is simply changing at a rate too slow to easily perceive. This creates a kind of illusion of stability in nature, where long-lived systems seem permanent even though they are gradually evolving in the background. Forests grow and regenerate. Oceans circulate nutrients and currents. Mountain ranges slowly erode. Rivers gradually change course. Each system carries its own timescale of transformation, and life exists within all of them simultaneously. This multi-layered structure of time is one of the most defining features of evolution. Different processes operate at different speeds, yet remain interconnected. Microbial evolution can occur rapidly, while geological change unfolds over millions of years, and ecological shifts occur somewhere in between. These layers interact continuously. Changes at one level influence changes at another, and through these interactions, the overall system remains dynamic across all scales. In this way, evolution is not a single process but a convergence of many processes operating in parallel, each contributing to the ongoing transformation of life, each shaping the conditions under which future life will emerge. And as this continues, the present moment becomes part of a much larger continuum, a continuum that extends backward into deep time and forward into an unknowable future, a continuum in which every living thing is both a product of what came before and a participant in what comes next. And within that quiet unfolding, evolution continues its work without pause, without direction, and without end. And as that continuum stretches further, something subtle becomes clearer in the background of all biological history. Evolution is not separate from survival. It is what survival looks like when extended across time. Every living organism that exists today is the outcome of an unbroken sequence of successful reproductions reaching back billions of years. At no point in that chain was continuity guaranteed. It was always conditional, always dependent on environment, chance, and the delicate balance between stability and change. And yet, despite this fragility at each step, continuity persists. This paradox defines life on Earth: individually fragile, collectively persistent. Across deep time, this persistence takes the form of repeated experimentation. Life explores variations in structure, behavior, and interaction, not through intention, but through the natural consequences of variation and environmental filtering. Some of these variations become foundational, others disappear almost immediately. Most exist only briefly in evolutionary terms, leaving faint traces in genetic or fossil records, and yet each contributes to the broader pattern. Even unsuccessful experiments are part of the unfolding story, because they shape the conditions in which later forms arise. Nothing in evolution is wasted in a strict sense. What does not persist directly may still influence what comes after, through ecological shifts, genetic remnants, or changes in environmental structure. In this way, evolution is cumulative not only in what survives, but also in what disappears. The past is never fully removed. It is reorganized. This reorganization can be seen in the structure of modern ecosystems, where ancient relationships continue to influence present dynamics. Predator-prey interactions, symbiotic relationships, and competitive pressures all have deep evolutionary histories. Many of the behaviors observed today are echoes of interactions that began millions of years ago. Even the most familiar environments contain layers of invisible history. A forest is not only a collection of trees and animals, it is the outcome of long evolutionary interactions between plants, fungi, insects, microbes, climate, and geology. Each element carries its own history, yet all are intertwined in a functioning system that continues to evolve. Beneath the surface of the soil, networks of fungi connect plant roots in ways that allow exchange of nutrients and chemical signals. This underground structure forms an additional layer of interaction that is largely hidden from view, yet essential to the functioning of many ecosystems. Above the soil, pollinators and plants engage in coordinated evolutionary relationships that have shaped both floral structures and animal behaviors. Some flowers bloom at specific times of day or year, synchronized with the activity patterns of their pollinators. Others produce scents or visual patterns that guide insects toward them in precise ways. These relationships did not emerge suddenly. They developed gradually through mutual influence over long periods of time, each side shaping the other. This mutual shaping is one of the most important drivers of complexity in evolution. When species interact closely over extended periods, they can become deeply interdependent. Changes in one species can lead to corresponding changes in another, creating co-evolutionary dynamics that propagate through entire ecosystems. In this way, evolution is not only about adaptation to environment, but also about adaptation to other life forms. The environment itself becomes partially biological, and life becomes a participant in shaping the conditions under which future life evolves. This recursive relationship between organism and environment creates feedback loops that operate across multiple scales. Small changes can be amplified through interaction, while large systems can stabilize through balance between opposing forces. At times, this stability creates long periods of relative ecological consistency, where species diversify within established frameworks. At other times, disruptions break these frameworks, forcing rapid reorganization. Both stability and disruption are essential components of evolutionary history. Without stability, complexity would not have time to develop. Without disruption, systems would not change or diversify. Together, they create a dynamic equilibrium in which life continuously evolves while maintaining overall continuity. This balance is not static. It shifts over time in response to external forces such as climate change, geological activity, and astronomical influences. Even Earth's position within larger cosmic cycles can influence long-term environmental conditions, subtly affecting evolutionary pathways over immense timescales. Life exists within a broader physical universe that sets the boundaries of what is possible, and within those boundaries, it explores an enormous space of variation. From microscopic extremophiles surviving in boiling vents or frozen ice, to complex multicellular organisms navigating intricate social environments, life occupies nearly every available niche on Earth. And yet, despite this diversity, the underlying processes remain consistent: replication, variation, selection, accumulation through time. These principles operate without awareness, without direction, and without foresight. They do not aim toward complexity or intelligence. They simply produce outcomes based on interaction between organisms and environments over time. And from those outcomes, complexity emerges when conditions allow. It is this emergence that leads to the astonishing variety of forms seen across Earth's history, from trilobites crawling across ancient seafloors, to dinosaurs dominating terrestrial ecosystems, to mammals expanding into diverse ecological roles after mass extinctions. Each era reflects a different expression of the same underlying process. The actors change, the stage evolves, but the mechanisms remain constant. Even now, evolution continues in subtle ways that may not be immediately visible. Genetic changes accumulate in populations. Species respond to shifting climates. Ecosystems adjust to human influence. New selective pressures emerge in urban environments, agricultural systems, and altered landscapes. Life continues adapting to life, and to the conditions created by life itself. Human activity has accelerated some of these changes, introducing new environmental dynamics at a global scale. Habitat modification, climate change, and species redistribution are reshaping evolutionary pressures across the planet. But even this acceleration is still part of the same underlying process: evolution responding to altered conditions, continuing without interruption. And through it all, the deeper pattern remains visible beneath every layer of complexity. Life does not move toward a fixed endpoint. It does not follow a single direction. It does not converge on a final form. Instead, it continues to branch, diversify, adapt, and transform across time that stretches far beyond any individual existence. And within that branching continuity, every living moment is both temporary and connected. Temporary in its specific form, connected through the unbroken chain of life stretching backward and forward across billions of years. A chain that remains unbroken even as its links change shape endlessly. And as the world remains quiet, That chain continues its slow and uninterrupted unfolding, carrying life forward into forms that have not yet appeared, guided only by time, variation, and the endless interaction between living systems and the world that surrounds them.